You're listening to Kai FM on 95.9. We're chatting to South African cricketer Temba Bavuma, a fascinating story that started in the streets of Langa Township down in Cape Town, led all the way to Newlands, and a century that many of you will remember from last season's tour by England, and of course a whole future ahead of him, which we're going to chat about as well. Temba, a lot of people are talking about how we grow the game and how we make sure that more young black South Africans feel, A, that cricket is a game for them, but B, get the opportunity to play. And I'm wondering if that will ever really be possible on scale if we don't get cricket into our schools. What are your thoughts on that? Because in a sense you had to move out of Langa for education to get a real opportunity to play schools cricket.
Yeah, I think the key word for me there in your question is the opportunity. I think, if you go to the township, whatever there is, the talent is there.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you talk about cricket, you talk about rugby or soccer, or whatever it is, the talent is there amongst your black Africans. And I think it's just a matter of the opportunity is not there. The guys don't have, readily access, to these quality facilities, to the elite coaching, and something, where I was at an advantage is that, I got drafted into a school like Sachs in Cape Town and finished off here at St. David's in Johannesburg, where I grew up in that system, in that environment, and my talent was kind of nurtured, and I was able to get to the point where I am. And a lot is said and a lot has been done about transformation, and you see the whole you see the quotas being implemented at franchise level. You see the target guidelines that are implemented at senior level being South Africa, but maybe from an infrastructure point of view, not enough really is being done at grassroots level. Whenever I go to Cape Town, where we stay in Langa, we stay opposite a school. It's a primary school that inhabits a majority of the kids in Langa. And there they've got absolutely no facilities. There's no cricket nets there. There's no soccer field. There's no rugby. So the kids have the talent, but they don't have an environment where they can use their talent. So maybe you want a situation where a bit more is done at grassroots levels, and people should hold a long-term view in terms of the results, in terms of seeing the quality come about.
Share with us your thoughts about the Langa Cricket Club, because that was your nursery, that was where you learned the game, that's where you got an opportunity to play. How important are clubs like that, and could that be perhaps an easier model to roll out, that we make sure there's a strong cricket club serving a number of schools? That might be a quicker way of doing it than trying to get every school in a position where they have facilities. Not that I'm looking for shortcuts, but I'm wondering if the cricket club is perhaps the right environment for getting young players in.
Yeah, I think the clubs, serve an important platform, or channel for the kids to get involved, in their sports. Langa itself, just looking at Langa, the community, there's a rich culture, in sport, from cricket, from soccer. The community is actively involved, in the sporting activity. So it was very easy for us young guys to get into sport because of that that high interest from the community. And Langa itself, the cricket club, has a rich culture, of cricket. There were guys before me, who made a name for themselves. And I think it could be a solution where, that kind of model there at Langa Cricket Club, is replicated, around the country. But if I look around the country, like here at Soweto, there's a strong culture there. There are guys before me who represented, first class cricket. And maybe it could be a matter of, those clubs need to be administratively managed a whole lot better. Support from above, support from your corporates need to be channeled through those clubs, and make sure that those clubs are in tip top shape.
In terms of cricket and batting on the one hand, bowling on the other, You came through as a batsman, Makaya before you, Kagiso, I guess at the same time as you, Kagiso Rabada, Mondes Ondeki, again a bowler. How important do you think it is that you've come through as a batsman, that there isn't developed this kind of stereotype that black players are always going to be bowlers, much the way people expect black rugby players to always be on the wing?
I think if you look at cricket itself, cricket is you can regard cricket as almost like an elite sport, almost
Yes.
like a white collar sport, if I could say. It's quite expensive as a batter to make it. I mean, all the kit that you have, whereas a bowler, you just need a pair of tackies. You get given a ball and you just run in and bowl. Hence why you see a large majority of our black African cricketers, are bowlers. And the fact that the role models before me were bowlers, it kind of inspire the guys, to become like your Mondes and Dekis, your Makai and Tinis. And I think, it's obviously quite a breath of fresh air that you've got a guy who's a batter, who's gotten to that level. And I think the guys will have a stronger belief in them that if Temba can get there, Temba comes from the same roots that they are currently in, they can also get there.
Let's talk a little bit about batting, because one mistake and you're gone. If you bowl a bad ball, you might get hit for 4, but you've got another 5 in that over, and you've got overs after that where you can put it right. It must be one of the most difficult things in sport. Maybe I say that because I was so hopeless at cricket myself. But is it uniquely difficult batting, do you think? Because not only does one mistake get you out, but you might sit for a day and a half before you even get back on the field again.
Yeah, I think that's the contrasting factor between, batting and bowling. Bowling, you've got ample, chances, opportunity to redeem yourself, whereas batting, generally one mistake, you're out. But in saying that, as a batter, that's the beauty of being a batsman, with that added element of pressure, if I could say. When you do well, you kind of revel in that in that mastery, if I could call it. And for me, it's just trying to enjoy that process of batting. Don't think of, you getting to 100, but more just, the moment that you're in and just trying to enjoy that process of batting.
Do you empty your head, or do you fill your head with what's happening in the moment? So between balls, the ball's bowled, something happens, you step away, the bowler goes back to the top of his run-up. In that moment before you take guard again, what are you thinking?
I think it's quite important that you have clarity in your mind, in whatever decisions that you take. So in that moment, I generally, quickly, analyze the previous delivery. But I mean, after 5 seconds, I try, switch off. And then when the bowler's at his mark again, I try switch on, and that's where my focus, becomes on the next delivery. I try, be as much as I can in that moment, because I mean, what has happened before that means absolutely nothing, and what is going to happen what's going to happen after this ball means also nothing. So it's important that you try stay and live in that moment, so you can actually play that delivery to your best of ability.
Were you doing that instinctively as a young kid, as a teenager perhaps, or did some coach say to you, this is a discipline you've got to learn?
No, that's something that I learned in my later years. Joining first class cricket. I remember the coaches that I worked with, Lawrence Mahatlane, Grant Morgan. They generally said, you want to try be clear. Your focus must be on the ball, nothing else. But yeah, it's something that I learned later on in my cricketing years.
So it was taught you. I always wonder if a batsman, particularly who's been playing a long innings, and whether when you step away you think to yourself, should I have pizza tonight or should I have a steak? Do you flush all of that out? Or does your life, because we all have lives beyond whatever we do, surely there are times when your life comes and taps on the side of your head and says, hey, you still need to go and pick up that couch for your flat or whatever?
I think as a batter, I mean, it's not an easy task, trying to, if you're going to seek to bat 50 overs straight, if you're playing a test match,
yes,
and you want to bat the whole day. So it's very important that you try switch on, and switching off. And switching on is, when it's your time to face the delivery as a batter, and then switching off is when your mind is completely away from that. And from my experience, I've had instances where I think, what am I going to, in between balls, what am I going to have for supper today? What am I going to do for my parents' birthday? I do think things like that, but once it's time for me to face the ball, then I kind of have to zone back in. But I think it's very important for you to switch on and switch off, just to give your mind that mental break in between balls.
Have you ever been really scared before a match, before going into bat?
I think I'm always, maybe not scared, but I'm always nervous. In any kind of game. I remember when I was a young guy, I always had to go to the toilet before I actually went into bat, and that still sometimes happen now. But the nerves are pretty much part of the game. I kind of see it as a positive thing if I'm nervous before an innings, and I think it's more. And at a younger age, it used to affect my game in the sense that I'd end up playing differently because I'd allow the nerves, that emotion, to take over, and cloud my decision making. Whereas now, being older, I've kind of learned that, I've learned to embrace, that emotion. I've learned to calm myself down, during those pressure situations, to allow myself to execute as well as I can.
Let's talk about a specific precious situation and the moment we celebrated at the beginning of the show, your maiden century for South Africa at Newlands against England. As you played that innings, was there any point at which you thought there's 100 in reach? Is that how your mind works? You get into the 50s, the 60s, does 100 start looming, or is that something you shut from your mind on that day?
I think leading up to the game, well, as a batter, you're prepared to do well, and obviously doing well is getting 100, getting 150. So the ultimate goal is always to get to that milestone, and it being my first milestone at that level was obviously something that was there in my head. But when the innings started and as my innings progressed, to be honest, I never had that thought. But once I got to around the 70, 80 mark, that's when I started looking up a bit more regularly at the scoreboard, and that's where that thought of the milestone was in my head. But then again, you still got to try find ways to still be in the moment, and make sure that you are making the best decisions.
And the moment at which you knew that 100 was going to appear against your name, do you remember the feeling? Is it something that you still think of? Do you ever dream about it, by the way?
I remember edging the ball through the slip. They moved the fielder just before that ball. Stephen Finn was bowling. I remember edging the ball. And I remember running and turning to see if the third man, the guy on the field, was going to get to there. And I saw him give up. And at that moment, I realized, I'd got to the milestone, and the celebration itself. That was all spontaneous. It's very hard for me to explain, the emotions or what I was thinking. At that time, seeing. I think the first people that I acknowledged were my parents. They were sitting, above me, straight above me. My dad, my mother, my sister, my uncle was also there. And obviously then after them were the team members. We're nothing without our team members. And seeing the joy on the guys' faces, that kind of made it a bit more extra special. But it's very hard for me. I've tried to explain the emotions, when people have asked me those questions, but it's very hard for me to explain, what exactly I was feeling. There was a mixture of relief, relief having finally got to that milestone, joy, seeing your parents, seeing your teammates, and also hearing the explosion amongst the spectators as well. That was also quite an eye-opening thing for me.